Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I am going to be doing a series review of the Left Behind books by Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins. I recently finished the 12th book, and there are actually 13 books in this series, but I've just read the 12 and I'm going to leave it at that. So I had a request to do a series review of this series, and then also I think it'd just be nice to tell you my final thoughts on finishing this very long series and possibly controversial series if you have certain beliefs about the end of days, I guess. Here's the first book, Left Behind. So this series follows the events of Revelation, mainly the rapture and then the years of tribulation until Jesus comes back. Follow the same core characters mostly through the whole thing. The books reference the Bible a lot, so it's not just like taking an idea and kind of going with it and making it their own. These authors used scripture to fuel the events and the plot of all of these books, and they quote scripture. It does feel like there's some merit to it. I definitely don't think that the actual rapture will happen exactly like how all of these books show it, but I think generally it's a fun series in a way to kind of see what could possibly happen. So growing up as a Christian myself, as these books were coming out, I always heard about them. Left Behind was like this big thing, and there's two original movies, I think, or maybe even three. And then there is a remake with Nicolas Cage in it, and I've watched that one as well. But I watched the original, like, Kirk Cameron Left Behind, and so that was my first exposure to this story. And I always found it really fascinating. So I first got introduced to the books because my church had them in their library, actually. So I was 17 when I read this first book, and I found it very fun to read. It was just, so much was happening. I just was like, wow, what if this actually happened? Like, that's kind of what a main thing that I like about books is like thinking, oh, could this actually happen? I really enjoy thinking about that kind of stuff. So I will just tell you all the books that are in this series that I have. I don't have the last book, the 13th book. I think it's called Kingdom Come. But I'll show you the 12 books that I have, and then I guess I'll just like tell you what I thought of the whole series. So yeah, I started with Left Behind. I was 17 and I was really interested in it. Book 2 is called Tribulation Force. So I read these like back to back, and this book really upped the ante, that's for sure. It's really fun. It's a good story. And then the next one is called Nikolai. I was never really sure how to say his first name, but it's either Nikolai or Nikolai. I'm just not sure. His last name is Carpathia, so Carpathia is the Antichrist in this series, so this book is kind of his rise to power, you could say. And the fourth book, Soul Harvest, which is my favorite book of the series, so this one is really great. And then the fifth book is Apollyon, the sixth book is Assassins, the seventh is The Indwelling, the eighth is The Mark, the ninth is Desecration, the 10th is The Remnant, the 11th is Armageddon, and the 12th is Glorious Appearing, and it is a white book instead of black, so it kind of shows that light and hope are coming back to the world. Yeah, so here's all the books. I don't know if I can pick them up, but there you go. So I won't go through every single book, like what I thought of them, except for maybe my favorites. So I definitely think the beginning of this series is the strongest, in my opinion. This is all my opinion, obviously. And I'm no literary genius, so take this with a grain of salt. But I would say the first 5 books are the strongest. I gave Left Behind and Tribulation Force 4 stars, and then I gave Nikolai, Soul Harvest, and Apollyon 5 stars. And these 3 plus Glorious Appearing are the only 5 stars that I gave out to this series. I think after book 5, once you get to Assassins, I feel like the plot slows down, because once your main group of characters kind of goes to their different outposts and like you switch perspectives a lot, and I found that each perspective, there was a lot of just sections of them talking back and forth that didn't really add anything to the plot, so I found it kind of pointless. So there were times where I was like, get on with it, I don't want to see this. So that happens with a lot of books with me though, so if you like slow character build dialogue type of stuff, then I mean, it probably wouldn't bother you, but there were times where I was getting kind of burnt out because I just felt like the books had more added to them that didn't need to be there. I will talk about why Soul Harvest is my favorite, and it's honestly just because the plot was the most exciting and fast-moving. I really felt the intensity of this book, and there were certain things that happened that were so interesting to read. I felt like there was really good imagery in this book, and just picturing all of what was happening was like really fun. Yeah, so Soul Harvest is my favorite book, probably even of the whole series. Like Glory's Appearing, the last book, I mean, yes, it's amazing because Jesus comes in that book. I think like obviously the Jesus book would be the favorite one, right? But if I was not including that one, then Soul Harvest would be my favorite of all the books. Now my lowest rated is Assassins. I gave it 3 stars. And that's going from Apollyon from 5 stars down to Assassins 3 stars. This plot just was really slow. That's the problem of it. The ending did have something pretty exciting in it, but to get there, it just was like, it was so slow. And I skimmed a lot of this book. So overall, I think it's an iconic Christian series to read. And yeah, I would totally recommend it to anyone who's interested. And I think it's definitely geared towards Christians just because it's in the perspective of Christians, and it's in the perspective of saying like Christians are in the right, like we figured it out, Jesus is the way. So there's not, it doesn't really look at it, it does talk about other religions, but it talks about other religions coming to Jesus, so there's that. As for what like I got out of it spiritually, it definitely made me appreciate my faith more. I would catch myself thinking like, oh, what would I do if I was in this situation? And then I was thinking, but I'm never going to be, which is really a comforting thing to have. So that was cool. It kind of just like, yeah, strengthened my faith that way. I think the strongest part of the writing is when they would describe really intense scenes. They're really good at painting a picture, and like just so that I could visualize everything. I could visualize all of the really crazy things that would happen, like, and then there was so many different people at different stages of faith, and so they really hashed that out, which I appreciated. Like everyone's different struggle with their faith, they really fleshed it out. They talked about it, they got people talking to each other, and it felt real. It felt like, yeah, some people take this long to make a decision. Sometimes it was like, wow, you still aren't convinced, but I get it. Some people aren't convinced yet. The dialogue and like the plot progression is where it's like, I did not connect to these books, but I think their strong points are their best points. Like they were great with their descriptions. It didn't feel like overdone or anything. Like they described it in a very visual way. Yeah, I really enjoyed this series. I'm really glad that I read it. I don't really have a good explanation for why I'm not interested in the 13th book, because why wouldn't I want to read about heaven? But I almost don't want them to like tell me what they think heaven is going to be like, because it's almost like I want it to be a surprise. As like weird and silly as that sounds. So that's kind of why I'm not interested in the 13th book, but I'm sure it's great because you'd be with Jesus the whole time, so that would be great. But yeah, so those are the 12 books. Those are my thoughts. Hopefully that was interesting or helpful or whatever. I definitely think Christians would get the most out of this series. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. Thank you for watching, and I will link all the videos that I've made over the years on these books. There's a couple discussion videos and stuff that I made, so I'll link those below if you want to like see more thoughts. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye!